Trumpism and conservative ideology has really messed up the minds of many. And unfortunately, what it does is it lay waste to the white working class. And JD Vance is the perfect example of how one can move out of there and completely turn on the people that he was from, this working class community, as well as just forget about policies that really help them. The New York Times has a great article. It's dated July 27th. It was released yesterday about JD Vance. And in the letter, it spoke about a correspondence between JD Vance, somebody that went to law school with him. And what it really shows is that JD Vance isn't, by definition, the conservative, MAGA, crazy guy that he is. He had a relationship, a very close friend that was a transgender person, and they would exchange emails constantly. And finally, JD Vance pretty much, by his votes and support, he just threw the guy under the bus. But I want to read you some excerpts of this particular New York Times article titled JD Vance, An Unlikely Friendship and Why It Ended. Subtitled, His Political Views Differed from a Transgender Classmates, but They Forged a Bond That Lasted a Decade until Mr. Vance seemed to pivot politically and personally. It drives me crazy, the types of subtitles and titles that the New York Times use, not really describing how deep the issue is. You should pretty much say JD Vance is a chameleon. Not only is JD Vance a chameleon, but JD Vance has no values if he can change it at will. But I want to read you a little excerpt here. It said, this was an email between Vance and his transgender friend. He said, "Hey, Sophies, here's an excerpt from my book." He was talking about his book to his friend. Mr. Vance wrote to his friend, Sophia Nelson, "I sent this to you not just to brag, but because I'm sure if you read it, you'll notice reference to an extremely progressive lesbian. I recognize now that this may not accurately reflect how you think of yourself, and for that, I'm really sorry," he wrote. "I hope you are not offended, but if you are, I'm sorry. Love you, JD." That's what he's writing to the transgender friend. Nelson wrote back the same day, calling Mr. Vance buddy and thanking him for being sweet, adding, "If you had written genderqueer radical pragmatist, nobody would know what you mean." Nelson asked for an autographed copy, then signed off with "Love, Sophia." So you can see that Vance was not a bad guy. He understood identities. He understood all these particular issues before he turned into this crazy right-wing kook. He then says, the emails in which Mr. Vance criticized former President Donald J. Trump both for racism and as morally reprehensible human being add to an already existing body of evidence showing Mr. Vance's ideological pivot from never Trumper to Mr. Trump's running mate. And they reflect a young man quite different from the hard right culture warrior of today who back then brought homemade baked goods to his friend after Nelson underwent transition-related surgery. The visit cemented their bond. In other words, he even cared for his friend who was trans and had the surgery to change. But it continues. But Nelson and Mr. Vance had a falling out in 2021 when Mr. Vance said publicly he supported an Arkansas ban on gender-affirming care for minors, leading to a bitter exchange that deeply hurt Nelson. He achieved great success and became very rich by being a never-Trumper who explained the white working class to the liberal elite, Nelson said, referring to Mr. Vance's successful 2016 book. Now he's amassing even more power by expressing the exact opposite. Now, Nelson, who opposes the Trump-Vance ticket, hopes the emails inform the opinions of voters. What he did is he finally said he had it. He said to hell with it. I know who Vance really is. I exchanged these emails with Vance. And look, if somebody can change like this to hurt the people he loves, to hurt the people he know would be affected by his policy, that's somebody that doesn't deserve to be a heartbeat away from the presidency or the vice president himself. He also talks about times when he had written conversation turn to a much discussed essay by Ta-Nehisi Coates. I don't know if you guys remember the book that Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote about reparations, etc. Mr. Vance offered whatever problems he had with reparations generally. He said, I have at least been convinced of the virtue of compensating modern victims who've suffered redlining or denial of federal benefits. So there you have a guy who comes out and he pretty much says, yeah, I can kind of support reparations, because, these people were treated badly. After the shooting at Emmanuel's AME Church in Charleston, remember that guy who shot down 10, 12 or so black people in the church, a white kid that had the gun? He said after a shooting at the Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, the two were again discussing race. Mr. Vance said he didn't understand why people can't see the connection between this person murdering innocent people and the fact that the Confederate flag by Democratic will still flies. In other words, he wanted the flag gone. He wanted the monuments gone at the South Carolina State House. I'm not sure how to wrap my head around this. You take a look at item after item and you wonder how could, first of all, Trump pick this dude, but he picked him because his ideology is malleable, right? That's why he picked him. He also said, Vance said, I'm obviously outraged at Trump's rhetoric, and I worry most of all about how welcome Muslim citizens feel in their own country, he wrote. And there have always been demagogues willing to exploit the people who believe crazy shit. What seems different to me is that the Republican Party offers nothing that's attractive as the demagogue. So you see, he even hit the Republican Party for who they have become. And it is sort of amazing that how this guy has come around. Now, there's another statement he makes in the article that I really want to cover, and that has to do with what he believed of the police, right? You always talk about the law and order party. Here's what he had to say, J.D. Vance, that is. He said, at times they exchange messages infrequently. At other times, they would have energetic back and forth several times a week. And their talks reflected the history playing around them. Protests against police violence in Ferguson, the massacre of black church goers in South Carolina, etc. But one of the times he had the following to say. Here's what he thought about cops. A conversation Vance had could be surprising. When it comes to cops, the law and order party, right? There's a conversation that Vance had with his friend. In October 2014, in the wake of killing of Michael Brown, an 18-year-old black man by a white officer in Ferguson, Nelson raised the idea of requiring that police officers wear body cameras. And this was Vance's response. I hate the police, Mr. Vance said in his response. Given the number of negative experiences I've had in the past few years, I can't imagine what a black guys go through. Also, this guy is admitting that he does know that police officers in general, first of all, they are power hungry. But secondly, what it means, the police interaction between law enforcement and police. He acknowledges it. So this is a guy that is completely different than what you're hearing. And anybody that has that lack of character, it should tell you something. It should disqualify both Vance and Trump from the presidency.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel. And number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.